reading you the first chapter of Russian Roulette. Alex Ryder, Book 10, Russian Roulette. Chapter 1, the prologue. Before the kill. He had chosen the hotel room very carefully. As he crossed the reception area towards the lifts, he was aware of everyone around him. Two receptionists on the phone, a Japanese guest checking in from his accent, obviously from Miyazaki in the south, a concierge printing a map for a couple of tourists, a security man, Eastern Europe, bored standing by the door. He saw everything. The lights had suddenly gone out, or if he had closed his eyes, he would have been able to continue forward at exactly the same pace. Nobody noticed him. It was actually a skill, something he had learnt, the art of not being seen. Even the clothes he wore, expensive jeans, a grey cashmere jersey, and a loose coat, had been chosen because they made no statement at all. They were well-known brands, but he had cut out the labels. In the unlikely event that he was stopped by the police, it would be very difficult for him to know where the outfit had been bought. He was in his 30s, but looked younger. He had fair hair, cut short, and ice-cold eyes, with just the faintest trace of blue. He was no large or well-built. There was a sort of sleekness about him. He moved like an athlete, perhaps a sprinter, approaching the starting blocks. But there was a sense of danger about him, feeling that you should leave it well alone. He carried these credit cards and a driving license issued in Swansea, all with the name Matthew Ruddy. A police check would have established that he was a personal trainer, that he worked in a London gym and lived in Brighton. None of this was true. His real name was Yasha Gregorovich. He had been a professional assassin for almost half his life. The hotel was in King's Cross, an area of London with no attractive shops, few decent restaurants, and where nobody really stays any longer than they have to. It was called The Traveller, and it was part of a chain. Comfortable, but not too expensive. It was the sort of place that had no regular clients. Most of the guests were passing through on business, and it would be their companies that paid the bill. They drank in the bar. They ate the full English breakfast in the brightly lit Beefeater restaurant. But they were too busy to socialise, and it was unlikely they would return. Yet some preferred it that way. It was saying in central London, Ritz, or the Dorchester. But he knew that the recapitionists, they were trained to remember the faces of people who passed through the revolving doors. Such personal attention was the last thing he wanted. A CCTV camera watched him as he approached the lifts. He was aware of it, blinking over his left shoulder. The camera was annoying, but inevitable. London has more of these devices than any city in Europe. And the police and Secret Service have to access to all of them. As Yasin made sure he didn't look up. If you look at the camera, that is when it sees you. He reached the lifts but ignored them, slipping through a fire door that led to the stairs. He would never think of confining himself in a small space. A metal box with doors that he couldn't open, surrounded by strangers. That would be madness. He would have walked 15 stories if it had been necessary, and when he reached the top, he wouldn't have been out of breath. His son kept himself in superb condition, spending 2 hours in the gym every day when that luxury was available to him, working out on his own when it wasn't. His room was on the second floor. He had thoroughly checked the hotel on the internet before. He had made his reservation, and number 217 was one of just 4 rooms that exactly met his demands. It was too high to be reached from the street, but low enough for him to jump out of the window if he had to. After shooting out the glass, it was not overlooked. There were other buildings around, but any form of surveillance would be difficult. When Yasin went to bed, He never closed the curtains. He liked to see out for any movement in the street. Every city has a natural rhythm, and anything that breaks it, a man lingering on a corner or a car passing the same way twice, might warn him that it was time to leave at once. And he never slept for more than 4 hours, not even in the most comfortable bed. "Do not disturb" sign hung in front of him as he turned the corner and approached the door. Had it been raid, Yasha reached into his trouser pocket and took out a small silver pen, about the same size and shape as a pen. He pressed one end, covering the handle with a thin spray of disaflorin, a simple chemical reagent. Quickly he spun the pen round and pressed the other end, activating the fluorescent light. There were no fingerprints, if anyone had been into the room since he had left. Then they had wiped the handle clean, but he put the pen away. They knelt down and checked the bottom of the door. He then reached into his trouser pocket and took out a small silk. If anyone had been into his room since he left, they had wiped the handle clean. He put the pen away, then knelt down and checked the bottom of the door. Earlier in the day, he had placed a single hair across the crack. It was one of the oldest warning signals in the book, but that didn't stop to be ineffective. The hair was still in place. He then straightened up and used his electronic pass key. Went in. It took him less than a minute to ascertain that everything was exactly as he left it. His briefcase was 4.6 centimeters from the edge of the desk. His suitcase was positioned at a 95-degree angle from the wall. There were no fingerprints on either of the locks. He moved the digital tape recorder that he had clipped magnetically to the side of the service fridge. He glanced at the dial. Nothing had been recorded. Nobody had been in. Many people would have found all these precautions annoying and time-consuming. Before he sent, they were as much as a part of his daily routine as tying a shoelace or cleaning his teeth. It was 12 minutes past 6 when he sat down at the desk and opened his computer. An ordinary Apple MacBook. His password had 17 digits, and he changed it every month. He took off his watch and laid it on the surface beside him. Then he went to eBay, left-clicked on collectibles, and scrolled down through coins. He soon found what he was looking for: gold coins showing the head of the Emperor Caligula with the date AD 11. There would be no birth for this particular coin because, as any collector would know, it did not in fact exist. In AD 111, the mad Roman Emperor Caligula had not even been born. The entire website was a fake, and the name on the coin dealer, Mintomatic, had been specially chosen to put off any casual purchaser. Mintomatic was supposedly based in Shanghai, and did not have a top-rated seller status. All the coins it advertised was either fake or valueless. Elson sat quietly until a quarter past 6. At exactly the moment that the second hand passed over the 12 on his watch. He pressed the button to place the bid, then entered his user ID, false of course, and password. Finally he entered the bid of £2,518.5. The figures were based on the day's date and the exact time. He pressed enter, and a window opened that had nothing to do with eBay or with Roman coins. Nothing else could have seen it. It would have been impossible to discover where it originated. The message had to be bounced around a dozen countries, travelling an anonymity network before it had reached him. This was known as onion routing because of its many layers. It had also passed through an encrypted tunnel, a secure shell that had enclosed that only Yasha could read what had been written. Someone had managed to arrive at the same screen by accident. They would have seen only nonsense. Within 3 seconds, a virus would have entered their computer and obliterated the motherboard. The other computer, however, had been authorized to receive the message, and Yasha saw 3 words: "Kill Alex Ryder." They were exactly what he expected. Yasha had known all along that his employers would insist on punishing the agent who had been involved in a disaster where the Stormbreaker operation had become. He wondered if he might himself might not be able to retire permanently. Of course, it was simple common sense. If people failed, they were eliminated. There were no second chances. Yasha was lucky in that he had been employed as a subcontractor. He didn't have overall responsibility for what happened, and at the end of the day, he couldn't be blamed. On the other hand, that would have to make an example of Alex Ryder. It didn't matter that he was just 14 years old. Tomorrow, he would have to die. Yasha looked at the screen for a few seconds more, then closed the computer. He had never killed a child before, but the thought did not particularly trouble him. Alex Ryder had made his own choices. He should have been at school, but instead, for whatever reason, he had allowed the Special Operations Division, or MI6, to recruit him. From schoolboy to spy, it was certainly unusual, but the truth was, he had been remarkably successful. Beginner's luck, maybe, but he had brought an end to an operation that had been several years in the planning. He was responsible for the deaths of 2 operatives. He had annoyed some extremely powerful people. He very much deserved the death that was coming his way. Yasha sat where he was, with the computer in front of him. Nothing had changed in his expression, but there was perhaps something flickering deep in his eyes. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. The evening sky turned a hard, unforgiving grey. The streets were full of commuters hurrying home. They weren't just on either side of the hotel window. They were in another world. Yasha knew he would never be one of them. Briefly, he closed his eyes. To think about what had happened. About Stormbreaker, how had it gone so wrong? From Yasha's point of view, it had been fairly routine. Assignment. A Lebanese businessman by the name of Horowitz-Chapter. He wanted to buy 200 liters of deadly smallpox virus called R5, and he had approached one organization that might be able to supply it with such huge quantities. That organization was Scorpio. The letters of the name stood for sabotage, corruption, intelligence, and assassination, which were its main activities. R5 was a Chinese product, manufactured illegally in a facility near Guiyang, and by chance one of the members of the executive board of Scorpio was Chinese. Dr. 3 had extensive contacts in East Asia and had used this influence to organize their purchase. It had been Yasha's job to oversee delivery to the UK. 6 weeks ago, he had flown to Hong Kong a few days ahead of the R5, which had been transported in a private plane. A turboprop X-Scion MA-60 from Guiyang. The plan was to load it into a container ship to Rotterdam, disguised as part of a shipment of the jargon Chinese beer. Special barrels had been constructed as a warehouse in Kowloon with reinforced glass containers holding the R5 suspended inside the liquid. There are more than 5,000 container ships at sea at any one time, and around 17 million deliveries are made every year. There isn't a customs service in the world that can keep its eye on every cargo, and Yasha was confident that the journey would be trouble-free. He had been given a false passport and papers that identified him as Eric Olsen, a merchant seaman from Copenhagen, and he would travel with the R5 until it reached its destiny. But as so often the ways, things had not gone planned. As planned, a few days before the barrels were due to leave, Yasha had been aware that the warehouse was under surveillance. He had been lucky a cigarette was being lit behind a window. That should have been empty. Told him all he needed to know. Slipping through Kowloon under the cover of darkness, he identified three agents of the AIVD, the Algemene in Lichtengen en Veiligheidsdienst, the Dutch Secret Service. There must have been a tip-off. The agents did not know what they were looking for, but they were aware that something was on its way to their country. Yasha had been forced to kill all three of them with a silenced Beretta 92, a pistol he particularly favoured because of its accuracy and reliability. Clearly, R5 could not leave in a container ship. After all, a fallback had been found. As it happened, there was a Chinese Han-class nuclear submarine in Hong Kong going through final repairs before leaving. Final repairs before leaving. Before leaving for exercises in the Northern Atlantic. Yes, I met the captain in a private club overlooking the harbour and offered him a bribe of $2 million American to carry the R5 with him when he left. He had informed Scorpio of this decision and knew that he would dig into their operation for profit. But there were at least some advantages. Moving the R5 from Rotterdam to the UK would have been difficult and dangerous. Horowitz-Chapter was based in Cornwall, with direct access to the coast, so the new approach would make for a much more secure delivery. 2 weeks later, on a crisp, cloudless night in April, the submarine surfaced off the Cornish coast. Yasha, still using the identity of Eric Olsen, had travelled with it. He had quite enjoyed the experience of cruising silently through the depths of the ocean, sealed in a metal tube. The Chinese crew had ordered not to speak to him on any account, and that suited him too. It was only when he had climbed on dry land that he once again took command, overseeing the transfer of the virus and other supplies that Horowitz-Chapter had ordered to be done swiftly. The captain of the submarine had insisted that he would wait no more than 30 minutes. He would have $2 million in a Swiss bank account, but he had no wish to provoke an international incident which would certainly have been followed by his own court-martial and execution. The 30 guards helped carry the various boxes to the waiting trucks, scrambling along the shoreline in the light of perfect half-moon. The submarine looked somehow fantastic and out of place, and submerged in the slate-grey water of the English Channel. And almost from the start, Yasha knew something was wrong. He was being watched. He was sure of it. Some might call it some sort of animal instinct, but for Yasha, it was simpler than that. He had been active in the field for many years. During that time, he had been in danger almost constantly. It is necessary to fine-tune all his senses simply to survive. Although he hadn't seen or heard anything, a silent voice was screaming at him that there was someone hiding about 20 meters away behind a cluster of boulders on the edge of the beach. He had been on the point of investigating when one of the salesmen standing on the wooden jetty had dropped one of the boxes. The sound of metal hitting wood, shattering the garden light. Yasha spun on his heel, everything else forgotten. There was limited space on the submarine, and so the R5 had been transferred from the beer barrels to less protective aluminium boxes. Yasha knew that if the glass vial inside had been shattered, if the rubber seal had been compromised, everyone on the beach would be dead before the sun had risen. He sprinted forward, crouching down to inspect the damage. There was a slight dent in one side of the box, but the seal had held. The guard looked at him with a silky smile. He was quite a lot older than this, and probably an ex-convict recruited from a local prison. And he was scared. He tried to make a light of it. "I won't do that again," he said. "No," Yasha replied, "you won't." The Beretta was already in his hand. He shot the man in the chest, propelling him backwards into the darkness and the sea below. It would be necessary to set an example. There would be no further clumsiness that night. Sitting in the hotel with the computer in front of him, he still remembered the moment. He was almost certain now that it had been Ice Rider behind the boulder. And if it hadn't been for the accident, it would have been discovered and then Alex had infiltrated sales enterprises, pretending to be the winner of a magazine competition. Somehow he had slipped out of the room, evading the guards and the searchlights, and had joined the convoy, making his way down to the beach. There could be no other explanation. Later, when Alex had followed Hale's sail to London, he had already been responsible for the deaths of 2 sales associates, Nadia Vole and the disfigured servant, Mr. Gwyn. Despite little training and no experience, this was his first mission. Even so, he single-handedly smashed the Stormbreaker operation. Sale had been lucky to escape a few steps ahead of the police. Kill Alex Ryder. It was what he deserved. Alex had interfered with a Scorpio assignment, and it would have costed the organisation at least £5 million. The final payment was owed by Howard's sale. Worse than that, he would have damaged our international reputation. A lesson had to be learnt. There was a knock at the door. Yasha had ordered room service. It was just easier to eat at the hotel. It was safer. Why make himself retire when he didn't need to? Leave it outside, he called out. He spoke English with no trace of Russian accent. He spoke French, German, and Arabic equally well. The room was almost dark now. Yasha's dinner sat on a tray in the corridor, rapidly getting cold. But he still did not move away from the desk. The computer in front of him, he would kill Alex Ryder tomorrow morning. There was no question of his disobeying orders. It didn't matter, the 2 of them were linked. They were connected in a way Alex couldn't possibly know. John Ryder, Alex's father, their code names, Hunter and Cossack. Yasha couldn't help himself. He reached into his pocket and took out a car key. Sort that had 2 remote control buttons to open and close the doors, but this key did not open until it did not belong to any car. Yasha pressed the open button twice and the close button 3 times, and a concealed memory stick sprang out of the palm of his hand. That stick sprang out onto the palm of his hand. He glanced at it briefly. He knew that it was madness to carry it. He'd been tempted to destroy it many times. But every man has his weakness, and this was it. This was his. He opened the computer again and inserted it. The file required another password. He keyed it in. There was letters on the screen in front of him, not in English letters, but in Cyrillic, the Russian alphabet. His personal diary, the story of his life. He sat back and began to read. Chapter 2. Elma, or Home in English. Yasha, we've run out of water. Go to the well. I can still hear my mother calling to me, and it is strange to think of myself as a 14-year-old boy. A single child growing up in a village 600 miles from Moscow. I can see myself stick thin with long fair hair and blue eyes. That always looks a little startled. Everyone tells me that I am small for my age, and they urge me to eat more protein, as if I can ever get my hands on anything resembles fresh meat or fish. I have not yet spent hundreds of hours working out, and my muscles are undeveloped. I am sprawled out in the living room watching the only television we have in the house. It's a huge, ugly box with a picture that only wavers and trembles to there and and hardly any channels to choose from. To make things worse, the electricity supply is unreliable. You can be fairly sure the moment you get interested in a film or a newspaper program, the image will suddenly flicker and die, and you'll be left alone, sitting in the dark. But whenever I can tune into a documentary, which I devour, it's my only window outside the world. I am describing Russia about 10 years before the end of the 20th century. It is not so long ago, and yet it is already somewhere that no longer exists. The changes that began in the main cities became a tsunami that engulfed the entire country. Although they took their time reaching the village where I lived, there was no running water in any of the houses, And so 3 times a day I had to work my way down to the well, with a wooden harness over my shoulders and 2 metal buckets dragging down my arms. I sound like a peace peasant, and a lot of the time I must have looked like one, dressed in baggy shirt and with no collar and a waistcoat. As a matter of fact, I had 1 pair of American jeans, which had been sent to me as a present from a relative in Moscow. I can still remember everyone staring at me when I put them on. Jeans. They're like something from a distant planet. And my name was Yasha. Yasha, not Yasin. Quite by accident, it got changed. That's why I'm going to explain what happened to me and what I became. Then I must begin here, in Estrov. Nobody speaks of it anymore, and it is not on the map. According to the Russian authorities, it never existed, but I remember it well. A village of about 80 wooden houses surrounded by farmland, with a church, a shop, a police station, a bathhouse, and a river that was bright blue in the summer, but freezing all year round. A single road ran through the middle of the village, but it was hardly needed, as there was very few cars. Our neighbour, Mr. Vladimir, had a tractor which often rubbed or past, bellowing oily black smoke. But I was more used to being woken up by a sound of horses hooving. The village was wedged between thick forests in the north and hills to the south, so the rest of the view never really changed. Sometimes I would see planes flying overhead, and I thought one of the people inside them travelling to the other side of the world. I was working in the garden, I would stand still and watch them, the wings blinking, sunlight glinting on their metal skin. Then they have gone out of sight, even only the echo of the engine behind. They reminded me of who and what I was. Estrov was my world, and I certainly didn't need an airplane to get from one side to the other. My own home, where I lived with my parents, was small and simple, made of painted wooden boards with shutters on each side of the windows and the weather vane that squeezed all night if there was too much wind. This is about Yasha Gregorovich, or Yasha Gregorovich, because that's his real name, actually. It's not about me. Not about me. This is about Yasha Gregorovich, or Yasha Gregorovich. My own home, where I lived with my parents, was small and simple, painted windows and weather vane that squeaked all night if there was too much wind. It was quite close to the church, set back from the main road, with similar houses on either side. Flowers and brambles grew right beside the walls, and were slowly creeping towards the roof. There were just 4 rooms. My parents slept upstairs, and I had room at the back, but I had to share whenever anyone came to stay. My grandmother, who lived with us, had the room next to mine, but she preferred to sleep in some sort of hole in the wall above the stove in the kitchen. She was a very small, dark brown woman, when I was young, I used to think that she had been cooked by the flames. There was no railway station in Estrov. It was not considered important enough, nor there was bus service or anything like that. I went to school in a slightly larger village that I liked to think of itself as a town 2 miles away down a track that was dusty and full of potholes in the summer, and thick with mud and all covered in snow. During the winter, the town was called Rosna. I walked there every day, no matter what the weather was, and I was beaten if I was late. My school was a big square, brick building on 3 floors. All the classrooms were the same size. There were about 500 children in all, boys and girls. Girls. Some of them travelled in by train, pouring out onto the just let you know I am a boy platform with eyes that were still half closed with sleep. Rosnar did have a railway station, and they were very proud of it, decking with flowers on public holidays, but actually it was a mean, run-down little place, and 9 out of 10 trains didn't even bother to stop there. We students were all very smart. The girls wore black dresses. We students were all very smart. The girls wore black dresses with green aprons and had their hair tied back with ribbons. The boys looked like little soldiers with grey uniforms, and can anyone guess what colour scarves? If you guess this colour, which is, I guess it is the best colour in the world, which is red. Red scarves. Red is the best colour in the world. For me it is. Argue with that, sure. I don't care. My friend's best is green. You're not doing well, Leo Treyakov. He'll boom. I'm sick of the sight of you. Buck up your ideas or get out of here. Even the teachers were terrified of him. But actually, he was a good man at heart. Why should we were brought up to respect our teachers, and it never occurred to me that his titanic wages were anything unusual. I was very happy at school. I did well. We're a SARS system. Every 2 weeks the teachers gave us a grade, and I was always a 5-star student. What we called Payatikora. The best subjects were physics and maths. These were important to the Russian authorities. Nobody ever let you forget their country. The country that had sent the first man, Yuri Gagarin, into space. There was even a photograph of him in front of the entrance, and you were supposed to salute him as you came in. I was also good at sport, and I remember how the girls were in my class. In my class used to come along and cheer me when I scored a goal. I wasn't all that interested in girls at this time, which is to say I was happy to chat to them, but I didn't particularly want to hang out with them. After school, my best friend Leo, that I just mentioned, and the two of us were inseparable. Leo Trechakov was short and skinny, with jutting out ears, freckles and ginger hair. He used to joke that he was the ugliest boy in the district, and I found it hard to disagree. He was also far from the bright. He was a 2-star student, a dismal Javoika, and he always gets into trouble with the teachers. This is about Yasha Grigorich, not about me. It's a diary about him. With the teachers, in the end, they actually gave up punishing him because it didn't seem to make any difference. He just sat there quietly daydreaming at the back of the class. At the same time, he was the star of the NVP, military training classes, which were compulsory throughout the school. Leo could strip down AK-47 from an automatic machine gun in 12 seconds and reassemble it in 15. It was a great shot, and twice a year there were military games, so we had to compete with the other schools using a map and a compass to find our way through the woods. Leo was always in charge, and we always won. I liked Leo because he was afraid of nothing, and he always made me laugh. We did everything together. We would eat our sandwiches in the yard, wash down the gulp of vodka that he had sold from home and brought to school in one of his mother's old perfume bottles. He smoked cigarettes in the woodland close to the main building, coughing horribly because the tobacco was so rough. Our school toilets had no compartments, and so we often sat next to each other doing what we had to, which may sound disgusting, but that was the way it was. You meant to bring your own toilet paper too, but Leo always forgot, and I would watch him guiltily tearing pages out of his exercise book. He was always losing his homework that way, but with Leo's homework, and he'd have to be first to admit it, it's probably what it was worth. So basically what they're saying about the school toilets. You know, when you have your own compartment to go to the toilet, you have a toilet there, 2 walls so no one can see you, and a door. Yeah, at their school, they're saying they had no walls. Everyone could see them, just do their business on the toilet. Everyone could see them, and they sat next to each other. And you had to bring their own toilet paper. If it's not Leo, he said since after he was doing it, everyone saw it because yeah. I wouldn't like that thing. You have to be naked in front of anyone if you want. So then, yeah, and then He couldn't find any toilet paper, so instead he had to rip pages out of his book to use it for toilet paper. The best time we had together was in the summer. We could go for endless bicycle rides, rafting across the country roads, shooting down hills, and pedalling backwards ferociously, which was the only way to stop. Everyone had exactly the same model of bicycle, and they were all death traps with no suspension, no lights and no brakes. We had nowhere to go. In a way, that was the fun of it. We used our imagination to create a world of wolves and vampires, ghosts and Cossack warriors, and we chased each other right through the middle of them. When we finally got back to the village, we would swim in the river, even though there were parasites in the water that could make you sick. And we always went to the bathhouse together, splashing each other with birch leaves in the steam room, which was meant to be good for your skin. Leah's parents worked in the same factory as mine, although my father would once study at Moscow State University, was the more senior of the two. The factory employed about 200 people who were collected by coaches from Estrov and Rosna and lots of other places. I have to say, the place was a source of constant puzzlement to me. Why was it tucked away in the middle of nowhere? Why had I never seen it? There was a barbed wire fence surrounding it, and a militar standing at 10 more pages till the end of the chapter. Standing at the gate. And that didn't make sense either. All it was produced was pesticides and other chemicals. Pesticides and other chemicals. I'm trying to do something quickly. Okay, no. Making it up. During the winter months, they weren't allowed to open the village shop before 10 o'clock in the morning. People would rush in as soon as it was light. Okay. I leapt off the bed, dropping the book, and ran downstairs to the house. The village was completely deserted. Our chickens were strutting around in the front lawn of our house, pecking at the grass. There was a dog barking somewhere. Everything was ridiculously normal. But then I heard footsteps and looked up. Mr. Vladimir, our neighbour, was running down from his front room, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Mr. Vladimir," I called out. "What happened?" "I don't know." He was back. He probably working on his tractor. It was covered in oil. They've all gone to sea. I'm going with them. "What do you mean, all of them?" "Our village, there's some sort of accident." Before I could ask any more, he disappeared down the muddy track. He had no sooner gone than the alarm went off. It was extraordinary, deafening, and nothing I'd ever heard before. Couldn't have been more urgent if war had broken out. And as the noise resounded in my head, I realized it had to be coming from the factory, more than a mile away. How could it be so loud? Even this fire alarm at school had been nothing like this. It was a high-pitched siren that seemed to spread out from a single point until it was everywhere, behind the forest, over the hills, in the sky. And at the same time, it was right next to me. In front of my house. I knew that there had been another accident. I had heard, of course, the explosion, but that had been half an hour ago. Why had they been so slow to raise the alarm? The siren stopped, and in the sudden silence, the countryside, the village where I spent my entire life, seemed to have become photographs of themselves. It was as if the outside looking in. There was nobody around me. The dog had stopped barking, the chickens had scattered. I heard the sound of an engine. A car came hurtling towards me, bumping over the track. First thing I registered, there was a black ladder. Then I took in the bullet holes all over the bodywork. The fact was that the front windscreen was shattered, but it was only when I stopped that I was shocking truth. My father was in the front seat. My mother was behind the wheel. Right, everyone, that's the end of me reading you that chapter. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you for listening to that. The start of Russian Roulette, the 10th book. chapter 1 to 2. Goodbye everyone, thank you for listening to this.